Speaking of important TV, let's talk the big one, JP. Big business took place this week. AEW Dynamite. I'll tell you what, JP, is the feeling back? I think it is. I fucking love this week's Dynamite. For 80-90% of it, which for me is basically 100% when it comes to a wrestling show. If you only give me like one or two things to complain about, then I'm living life. I'm fucking good. Don't know where you stand on this, JP. I know obviously your Irish Chad might have given some thoughts on the midweek news dump this week, so I'm interested in your thoughts on Dynamite this week. But fuck me, I was watching this live and like from start to finish, this felt like a new company. AEW this week, and I might be getting tricked by the fancy new stage and the new colours and the very busy crowds. Busier than it was maybe given credit. Looked like it was near 10,000 than the numbers we were hearing last week. Very good overall for a show that got a at a non-announcement, I suppose, as far as Mercedes Mone coming in. But yeah, it gave us one of the hottest, freshest feeling Dynamites in a long time. Big crowd, new setting, new big characters, including Mercedes herself, Carter, Osprey. I was a pig in shit that first hour and pretty much most of the second hour as well. Tell me you would be, JP, because yeah, I feel like, from the top onwards, this was a cracking edition of Dynamite this week.
I was for 75% of it, and then I have to say Lionhook appeared. And that's kind of where my interest kind of slightly fell off on there. And then by the time it hit the main event, it was like, I couldn't get excited by Willow Nightingale versus Rio because I knew I'd have to hear Rio's theme music. Lionhook was so bad, I fell asleep during this, like when I was watching it again. But I'm kind of with you in the sense that it had all the components that had been missing from like sort of Dynamite over a little while, where it does feel like a different show, and it helps. Obviously, they've gone through like a kind of a 3-week like rebranding experience, putting 3 big stars into the mix, who are who feel like they've added, and each one of the debuts have been kind of okay. Even though I have misgivings about Mercedes Mone as a promo, and the promo itself didn't deliver a lot of stuff. That wasn't it. It was about the moment of her coming out and the CEO and getting the chance and feeling like a big star. And that worked. And that impression of it, I think when we get round to the ratings, it'd be handy in future if they announce this shit in advance. I'll just throw that out there. That might help them just in terms of like drawing ratings. But from a creative perspective, there was, I think that hot crowd then massively helped Samoa Joe Wardlow, which I wasn't expecting to kind of enjoy as much as it was. And I thought, actually, this was kind of okay. Even if the Swerve Strickland stuff was, it's not lackluster. It's just, it wasn't prominent that night. And that is the World Championship and things like that ultimately. But yeah, I'm kind of with you in the sense that, because it's a 2-hour wrestling show and there's so many different people involved, you're not going to love each and every part of it. That very rarely happens. And they could have better promoted the fact there's going to be a show-long storyline with Mercedes Mone. They should have been announcing she's going to be watching. Yeah, she's going to be watching the main event and stuff like that, rather than she's got changed into her wrestling gear and out she runs.
Hey, she looked good though.
Yeah, she did. I mean, she just seemed to be more interested in kind of dancing as much as anything else. The hair's a bit like wild and all over the place, but for the image they want to project of her, and the CEO thing worked. That was part of what it was. I was sick of hearing it by the end of it.
Got over right away though, didn't it? Like that's the thing for me. That was the home run of it. Like obviously it was never going to be Punk, and as we'll talk about later, they tried to advertise it like the Punk thing. But I think this was AEW's best debut since that. Like I was a big doubter on it because I was like, she's not really a great promo. She's an awkward speaker, I'm sure I'm going to get killed if we put this on YouTube by the fan base that did come out for her. To be fair, they did leave their house for this one. Just adding to the pile here. But like, she's awkward as a public speaker. But it worked because I think they had a really good balance of from the heart stuff about like a career and about what the women's revolution and all of that stuff. I think they threaded that really well. But then she also managed to balance it, and this is what she does, and this is what she brings to the table by also coming across as a fucking gigantic star. Like, when she got that out the way and got the tears out the way and got serious and talked about a couple of the potential matches she had coming up, and yeah, she could have hammered home a little bit more about the main event. It was almost perfect for what it was. It really was, and she does. She's very much, she's a look, she's a presence, she's a star quality, whatever it is. She's got that if factor as far as like being a gigantic women's wrestling star, and it was all over the screen here. They didn't, skimp on it. They gave it like the big introduction. They did it at the top of the show, which I also think, maybe it wasn't the smartest from a ratings point of view, but it was, again, that's the first quarter is always the highest quarter at AEW, so you get your most people watching. So, I guess it does work from that point of view. But it just started the show hot in such a fresh way, and immediately made the company feel different, and immediately made the women's division more than anything feel different. And it made, like we said earlier when we talked about the news stories of, things seem to be swinging in the other direction now, where talent are choosing AEW over WWE, and we've got 3 major ones in a row. It was a gigantic part of making the feeling feel like it's back, and making AEW feel like it's the place to be, because this is where she wants to be, and she made that clear. It was just a win all round, I think, for her, for the company, for the show, for the crowd there. It was just, it worked massively.
I mean, it worked for the night. There's the thing that I'm always generally worried, because it's Tony Khan in the women's division in AEW, and that's where like the asterisks and the, But if you're talking about she's the highest paid woman in wrestling, you are duty bound to use her in the most prominent ways possible. I know, in fact, she was doing like the Boston media rounds as well this morning. And they need to do more stuff like that. They should be hyping up the fact she's in The Mandalorian. I know I've banged on about this for what feels like a couple of years. It's a massive fucking show, and she's in it. Work on that fact. She needs, I'm not a fan of the Tony Storm character. No matter how much she throws herself into it, I'm never going to like it. It's so performative. You move the title off her and you put it onto a Mercedes. I actually think, as soon as possible, you have to do that. You have to go with like a kind of like a big star. I'd almost do it as like at Dynasty, if you can kind of get away with it, because I think they've done as much as you're going to really do with the Tony Storm run. I don't know how much more worthwhile that's necessarily going to be. I think it's going to force them, and it's forced their hand, and maybe this is what it's needed, that you're investing in someone so much to put a prominence to the women's division. I'd be putting her on other shows as well. I'd be definitely hyping her up for being on Collision and things like that. That's where she, because that is a show that doesn't do large ratings, and it doesn't do like good crowds, and they can need all the help they can get. I think they need to be utilizing her. And again, like as Andy says there in the chat, credible opponents like need to go in at like a Serena Deeb. I think would be like a really good kind of like first opponent from like a kind of like a wrestling perspective. Even as much as I like the Serena Deeb character, that's what it needs to be. It needs to have that like element of seriousness to it. Although it feels like, I mean, the Willow Nightingale stuff obviously plays into the storyline as well. And then is there a point when she's going to be going back to Stardom? She's going to be going back to New Japan? Is that going to be the case? I mean, I'd almost want to keep her away from that, because I don't think that helps her. I mean, dare I say it? I just don't think it's not so. Do it at the Dome, but I wouldn't do it anywhere else. I don't think there's any other like sort of massive shows that I would necessarily have her on at the moment until those companies have got their shit together, frankly. And I think that's when she mentioned about it being like a global revolution. That's what it felt like. That's what I took from it, like the comment there about this as well. But yeah, they need to be hammering home Mercedes Mone all over the place. She needs to be all over her social media, all of those followers. They talk a big game. Let's see if they fucking watch, because that would be the thing that you really ultimately want them from there. If you're as big a fan of Mercedes Mone, Mercedes Bernardo, Sasha Banks, then maybe do the one thing that she kind of wants you to do and actually watch her on fucking wrestling telly, rather than talking and getting angry about other people who don't like her as much as you do. Now that's always the thing that I've never understood.
Depends if they got Nielsen boxes. Hopefully they do. But no, yeah. I thought it was a win. Like everyone, the CEO chant has been in my head for the last few days. Thought that the song was overall a win. bit weird they went the going the Walter route. We've all got other wrestling comparisons with that sample. I missed the Criss Cross knockoff. I was a big fan of that Mone. But to be fair, I liked it because it was shit, rather than because it was good. But it worked. It got over on night one. It's a little bit of a cringy catchphrase, but it's an alternate to the boss basically. But it works. And yeah, I just thought it was a home run week one. You're absolutely right to be cautious about the follow up and such. But again, this is the AEW women's division, and she was presented the way they present big stars when they come on, when the men. I mean, let's just say it. They usually save this type of pomp and circumstance for men, and they save these big segments for men. And we haven't seen in AEW on the other side of it, a woman come in and deliver the way she did. She came across like a bigger star than pretty much the entire men's division as well on the night. So yeah, massive win for the company, and I think the momentum of that really kind of flew through the show. You mentioned we can go semi in order. You mentioned Joe and Wardlow there. It didn't for me in that one. I said I liked 85% of the show. A little bit of a down bit for me, really. It wasn't bad. It was fine. And I think the crowd, because again, it felt like a hot Dynamite, like in the early days where there were a lot of rabid fans there who were there to see Mercedes, but there to see the hot product, which for one night again felt like AEW carried it. Because otherwise it was just all right, wasn't it? It was just Wardlow and Joe, and Wardlow didn't really convince me anymore that he deserved the spot. Made me even more worried for him coming out of it, really. And that, like, honestly, maybe I'm just a bad booker, but like I said on Spotlight last week, JP, I think I just cut bait. I just used the TV time on someone else. I've heard the argument for there are other things you can do with Wardlow and other people you can work with. But for me, like, I just use that time. I don't know. Whatever TV time you had to sign for Wardlow, give it to Big Bill. Give it to fucking, Hobbs. Give it to someone else. Like, I just don't. Where's he go from here? He had his moment. Joe won the end. Yeah, I don't know if you had more takes on it. I've got more takes on the Adam Cole intro than I have the match itself. It was a match. But yeah, crowd carried it.
I want to know what you think about the Adam Cole bit before that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as a match, I thought this was fine, and it partly because the crowd were keen, and again, it's that, like you mentioned about having a hot crowd and the crowd that like were well up for this, and that did definitely add something for it. But then we get into what do we do next with him? He's had his world title shot, he's cashed that in. In theory, he goes to the bottom of the line. What do? Have him killing jobbers? What does that achieve? Well, that'll be like sort of round 4 or 5 of doing the same kind of gimmick with him effectively. Yeah. I know they somewhat protected him by having him pass out as opposed to tapping out. Okay, and that's kind of fine, but yeah, really, where do you go from this with him? Like, where do you end up?
That much? You know what I mean? Nah. I'm thinking about like, I'm not bothered though. Don't want to put the brain space in. So what can you do with Wardlow? How can you heat Wardlow up?
I always think with this, but it's not a suggestion that they'll do. Like with guys like that, I always think put them in a fucking tag team. Put them in a tag team with another big bloke. Have a couple of a big bloke killer team, and lo and behold, you can get something from that. And then you're kind of getting like if him and Hobbs had been a tag team for a year, I guarantee we'd be fucking banging on about them all the time. They'd been called the team meat or whatever it is.
Send them to Japan.
Yeah, exactly. Do that type of stuff there. But that's the problem with him as a character, is he just feels like he himself is very, very stale. But for that short period of time, he didn't feel as stale as he has been doing. And he certainly didn't look like a bloke who was going to put on a pair of sliders and go round to get some king-size silver skins from the news agents while wearing his pajamas.
He looked like he did, at least unlike me, got on a lineup this week on the beard. So, take that as a win. I wish I looked as good as Wardlow on a bad day, to be honest. So I shouldn't give him any grief for his luck. But yeah, at least he looked arse this week. You mentioned the Adam Cole thing. Like, that was the most NXT thing I've ever seen. Like, that feels like something that would open a takeover. Adam Cole opening a history book and it's got an NXT logo on it or something like that. Like, if Wardlow doesn't help, I don't think that helped either. I'm not sure if it was a good idea, and I'm not sure if it was well executed. It was what it was. Adam Cole, yeah, he's probably best sat backstage in AEW these days. The only thing I was gonna say, like, I do think, as a minor critique, 'cause I love this show, I've got so many positives to say. I do think like Joe and Swerve doesn't feel as hot as you would like it to right now. I think cooled off a little bit there, hasn't it? I think coming out of the three-way, they just haven't really got going again. There's so much other shiny new thing going on in AEW. Mercedes over here, Okada over here, Ospreay over here. That Swerve and Joe feels a little bit lesser than. And yeah, as much as I enjoyed them taking advantage of the crowd reaction and keeping the hot show going and it feeling fresh that a world title match was here, it did have that also negative effect of a world title match was here, and it didn't really feel like an A thing going on the show on this night with so many other things around it.
Yeah, it like you say, it felt like he was very lost in the shuffle that Swerve Strickland was there
for a few weeks.
Yeah, and there is it's almost like over this period of time, in some ways I wish they just prefer to stick with the shiny you things and then go back to this. Like in the last couple of weeks and the build up to it as well, as Swerve Strickland kind of makes a case of, I know these new people have been coming in trying to make a name for themselves. I've been keeping an eye on you, Joe, and you can work that into a kind of into a storyline. That would have been the way that I personally would have done that as well. Not that it's necessarily bad, but
no.
Part of the appeal of Swerve Strickland is the entrance and stuff like that. Instead of him coming out and doing Superman beating up a load of security, it doesn't really do anything for me. I've seen it's very WWE. And yeah, like you want to see them doing proper like in-ring promo segments against each other because that's when it has been good.
He needs to claim back being the main character of these shows. Yeah. It's understandable. He's not right now, but it's just a little bit of a negative on the world title picture right now. Getting into the main characters of the show, yeah, Elite, Kingston, Pac, and Penta was after that, and then we went into the Ospreay promo. I'll just repeat what I said on Spotlight, JB. Fucking love this Elite act. Like, I love it. I love the timing of the entrance. I love Dickhead Okada. Like, the more I'm seeing of him, Okada working weekly AEW TV is exactly what I want. I'm not sure about doing the match next week. I'm actually quite shocked they're doing that, especially on a show because they had the advert for Christian and Edge for Cope and Christian Cage here at this point. Felt like that was enough for the Toronto show next week. Commendable that they're advertising a lot of matches, and if anything, we know more matches for Dynamite next week than we do Rampage and Collision combined this weekend. But yeah, that was the only weird thing coming out of this for me was obviously the Okada Kingston stuff with Okada holding up the Continental belt. Just the Continental belt, not the other two apparently. Doesn't want the other two. So whatever, Continental belt's apparently a thing now. But it's next week, the match. We've started hot with Okada, but didn't expect it to be that hot, that quick.
Yeah, and then like, where's this going to be featured? Because clearly, I mean, this is going to be one of the things about it. It's not going to feel like it's the most prominent match on the show, and it really should be.
Yeah,
Okada full time should be main eventing Dynamite in a singles match, and instead it isn't because it's going to be the Toronto Street Fight. It is a kind of a strange one, and I don't know whether or not it's because they want to get to the Pac match. They seem to be separating these belts, which in essence I'm all right with, but then why you fucking join them up in the first place? Again, a problem of their own making. Like, we put a moratorium on merging belts. We've seen this. We saw New Japan do it. It was a fucking disaster. And unless stuff is going away permanently, it's not like there's New Japan strong belt. Is that going to be around? They're just going to be forgotten about into the annals of time. Yeah, exactly.
It felt like at the time, wasn't it reported New Japan didn't really know that they were going to be doing that with their belts, and they were like, huh? And obviously ROH is, as we mentioned before, running without a title. So yeah, this point was probably always going to come. Never mind the politics of Okada holding that New Japan strong belt, but yeah, this is Tony Khan all over it. It's like, we need a belt for this new tournament. Oh, now, and then we'll make a triple count. Oh, now we've got to split them. And now we're just left with an extra belt. And it's also probably the reason the rankings have gone away. That like, it was like, oh, fuck, we've got 12 belts. These rankings probably don't make sense, do they? Fuck it. Tony Khan gives and Tony Khan takes away. But presumably that, I mean, is there any other scenario? Okada's clearly going to beat Kingston for the belts. Like, if clearly they're separating the belts. Clearly Okada can't lose to Kingston next and shouldn't lose to him when the character's feeling this hot right now, but just an odd way to get there.
It's an odd way to get there. It's slightly rushed, but it gives him a title that it can just be his, and he can just defend it and beat like a series of obviously very good wrestlers.
The mid-card belts. Can he have the international title as well and make a new triple crown?
Yeah.
FTW belt, throw that in. I'm sure there's another one. Throw that in.
Oh, for fuck's sakes. Why is that
TNT.
thing still around? Yeah, you put the TNT belt into the mix as well. Had him against Adam Copeland. That's a match he'll be, the old Copey, old Adam will be fucking petitioning for massively.
Pretending he ever watched the Tokyo Dome show. Be like, oh yeah, I was there. I was watching it all. Honest folks. But getting away from it again. Another fun match.
Yeah.
That segment. This felt like, I know you're not a trios fan, JP, but like this felt, it was just polished in a way that was like, oh yeah, of course. Okada's used to working matches like this all the fucking time on these Road to tours, and the Bucks were, again, the chemistry between the three is the thing I'm keeping an eye on right now. It's just, there's so much money in this act. It is, I said it before, never been happier to be wrong. It's a stroke of genius putting these three together.
Absolutely.
It's perfect for Okada, perfect for the Bucks. It's giving them a focus because you can see what they're doing in the way they're structuring these matches and the way they are about Okada. It's about getting him over. Perfect. Just, yeah, chef's kiss. One of the best decisions I think the company's ever made.
And at least this time round, in terms of there wasn't like a trios belt, but it was like people who at least are, for the most part, at the higher end of the totem pole in AEW. So I was kind of fine with that because obviously there are the various, the Okada singles match. We're going to go from Kingston and then probably get to Pac for the pay-per-view and stuff like that, where it's going to be in that position, not necessarily to steal the show, but to have like a really good, excellent match in there so they can deliver on their best pay-per-view ever kind of streak that Tony likes to bang on about.
On that note, yeah, we had Ospreay up next, cutting his promo against Danielson, and it feels like a worn point at this point, JP, but Ospreay can promo, apparently.
Yeah.
He was, again, similar to the Okada. I had my doubts about him coming into AEW. As he put a foot wrong as far as, like, this is like 3 promo segments in a row where, as we keep saying, bruv stuff isn't for us, but is it for the Americans? They fucking love it. And he was massively over again. Came across like the biggest star in the room. Came across like the hottest star in the room. And he has got that, he believes what he's saying. He's got a bit of passion. And sometimes that's all you need. And I think, yeah, quietly on the sly, maybe doing a lot of those backstage New Japan promos and, being main event New Japan shows and cutting the promos at the end of the show. He's quietly turned into a decent enough promo. And it's, for whatever reason, it's all clicking with Ospreay right now in AEW.
It really is, even if it's a nightmare for me from growing up in London, of hearing people, all right, bruv, all right, geez, all right, bruv, all right, geez, all right, mate. Like all of that kind of stuff, it just sends me into a fucking tears. But it works. It's not about what I necessarily think. It's like you have just said, it's not really for us. Works that crowd. They're singing along to the Ospreay song. He feels like he's a big star to this audience, like straight away. And again, we're going to say this when we get into ratings discourse with this as well. Well, this hasn't drawn and this hasn't drawn. It's like, no, you need to allow this to kind of build because this feels like, it very much feels he's on a trajectory to win the world title at Wembley. Like he feels like he's on that trajectory already, and he bloody well should be. Or certainly challenging for the title as well. So it feel like, and here as well, it's like say it was the passion, even if it's he is the feeling thing I didn't get. Maybe it's because I'm an old man and that's slightly lost on me. But it was, what did you want from me? You wanted like a kind of an impassioned promo, and that's what we've had. And he's comfortable on TV doing week to week TV stuff. I even think as well, even going back to like Rev Pro at the 229 when he's gotten used to delivering live promos in front of crowds as well. He's probably got a lot more experience in doing that than we. He's done it in Japanese, for fuck's sakes. Let's give him his dues on this front. He's worked on it. It worked.
Triple H look silly with his whole, he's a work rate guy. He is, but yeah, there's clearly more to it, and we're seeing him like Okada just become more of a fully formed TV character, and it's fucking brilliant to see. Other stuff on the show, want to throw out another highlight for me, was actually up next on the show right after this. Jay White and Darby Allin. Fucking love this. Like it was like a preview of a bigger version of this we'll probably get based on the angle afterwards. But like, firstly, the match was fucking awesome. Like again, the crowd had been really loud, and they definitely quietened down a little bit at the start. It was a bit of a slow burn, but that's kind of the Jay White style. But then the perfect matchup for a Jay White is someone like Darby Allin, where like he's so explosive and so exciting, and so and he's going to get that crowd with him, whether he's going to have to kill himself to do it. Like it was just a lesson in how to structure a match. It was almost perfect as far as just a heel on top and a babyface fighting from underneath. I love the match. Love the idea of the match because it put Jay White over really strong. Fucking love the counters running into the finish. Like, Jay White's one of the great counter wrestlers, but the finish, the way they timed it, made him look really strong because it was essentially, as clean as a clean win can come for a character like Jay White. Made loads of sense because Jay White's going to be pushing on as far as, being on the show while Darby Allin is possibly falling off the side of Everest. And then to add to it, again, this was just quality booking. Yeah, let's just do an old school injury angle and write him off, and let's beat the shit out of Darby Allin. And it was 2 for 2 because we also got the end of the Bang Bang Sister Gang, which was, for an angle I fucking hated and just wanted them to get to here. This was well done too because it made sense. They were going to beat up Darby Allin. The 3 baby faces of the group come out and try and stop them, and then heels are heels and they're dickheads. So they use that as their moment to turn on. Billy Gunn, of course, getting the shine and getting the big chair shots, beating the shit out of Caster and Bowens, and then to add on it, Pillmanizing with a baseball bat Darby Allin. Like, what a gang of bastards these came off as. And Jay White came across as the absolute star of the 3, and the Guns are good like that. They kind of, let Jay kind of have that shine. And in one night, it felt for me, I guess we've got to get through this trios match first. Jay White's back as at least an upper tier singles guy in AEW.
And that's probably, you've mentioned the thing at the end that makes me just slightly worried about it, is the fact that there's fundamentally trio style belts that's at the center of a lot of this stuff. And that's the stuff that I kind of personally don't like, because I think of the job they did with Jay White and the build to MJF and how much he went off the boil after that match. Like, this is the closest we've had to that since then. When was that match? That was at like the end of December, wasn't it? It was World's End. Like, we've, Jesus Christ, we're into like kind of mid-March now at this stage. Like, that's like, that shows you what can happen if you just get someone wrong. And we were completely convinced he couldn't lose anything from that MJF match. Whereas here, like, I suppose I didn't have high expectations for this, and I was just pleasantly surprised by how good it was. But obviously the thing with Darby that worked with this is the glass spot and the reminder of, like, look at what he did like a couple of weeks ago. Look how insane that dive was. He's still going to be feeling the effects of it. Why? Because we all fucking would. If you had to do something like that, I wouldn't be getting out of bed by that point, let alone bloody traveling to Boston, let alone climbing Mount Everest. So it ticked several boxes at the same time. Really good TV match, heated up Jay White, broke up a stable that shouldn't have been around in the first place, and did a course correction on it. And for that, I was just grateful.
Yeah. Also, Lionhook had a match. Apparently, that's a thing. No one asked for it.
Oh, fuck me. No.
It was so
wrestling next week, aren't they?
We put off talking the ratings because, yes, they absolutely should have, advertised Mercedes. Apparently the ratings was worse than it looked as well. Wrestling Hours have put out like today. It wasn't even 801,000, which was what it looked like. It was actually 798. So just to like kick them while they're down. Obviously the quarter hours, they've got the overrun now on WrestleNomics as well. Telling you the quarter hours didn't make good reading for was Chris Jericho. I said that on the Discord today. For me, JP, it's not. I mean, I want to put the boot in with Chris Jericho because I enjoy putting the boot in with Chris Jericho because fuck Chris Jericho. But he was in the death slot, and it was interesting that they put the women in the main event because usually they put them in the death slot, and that's probably a positive rather than a negative. But in that death slot, in that kind of second from last spot on a Dynamite, 732,000 for the Jericho segment, 348,000, and then into the main event, which we can talk about as well, 627,000 apparently now into a 733,000 overrun. It's kind of two-pronged that, I think, JP. One, we could use it to beat Jericho with, but two, I think if you're going to go forth with, trying to establish a women's division and putting women like, Willow Nightingale in main events, then you're going to have to accept that you're going to have some issues as far as, retain an audience until you get the whole division over on the level that Mercedes is.
I think this is where they made the mistake of not having Mercedes Mone say in that opening promo, I'm going to be watching the main event, I'm going to be there. And actually have that kind of build to that, so we knew she was going to be there. I think the thing about the Jericho, and the Gates of Agony match, is just it felt out of place with everything else we've mentioned about the kind of new shiny feeling around a lot of AEW stuff. And, you know, again, with ratings, and it always feels like this is just generally the disclaimer of, if you're doing a good product, the ratings don't immediately like kind of emphasize that. A lot of the times it takes that bit of time for an audience to go, this is worth investing my time in. But it was just it's a pointless match with a pointless feud, and it's the lead in to a main event between two people who are not presented anywhere near main event stars for a TV show. And that's a problem. And the only person who was like a main event star in that last bit was Mercedes Mone. And you need to announce that. You need to actually fucking say this stuff. You can't work on the idea. And that's always been a problem with them. There's that promotional side.
Million overall viewers for our opening segment, which, you know, always does well. It's within the normal pattern. You know, Big Bang Theory or whatever is on before is going to help you with that. But like the difference between that and almost half that many people watching the main event segment, but in the demo as well. I'm sure they could have kept more of those people if they made it more obvious. Because it was a shame, because the main event was really fucking good. Like, it was a really good match. That shouldn't get lost in it, because overall it was a really good quality Dynamite. It's just, you've got to sell it, haven't you? You've got to sell this product. You've got to sell this package. You probably should have announced Mercedes ahead of time, as we talked about in Spotlight. You probably should have pushed that she was going to be in the main event. Don't think she's like, you know, CM Punk level draw or anything like that. But I think the number would have been healthier if they'd just done that basic, you know, promotion, and, you know, that women's main event could have really benefited from that, because it was a cracker of a match.
I like Willow Nightingale. I think there's a lot of traction. I don't quite understand the Stokely Hathaway Chris Statlander stuff, because that feels like very much like an aside at this point. And
it's just a setup for a backstage joke, innit, for Mercedes and him to do something, some skit or something.
And that's basically it as well. I mean, and obviously with like kind of having Willow Nightingale kind of like associated with I imagine this is leading to Chris Statlander turning heel on Willow Nightingale. Frankly, that's always seems like the direction they're going in, after she probably chooses to team with Mercedes Mone over Chris Statlander against Sky Blue and Julia Hart, or something along those lines. You can see the way that it's going for this. Rio matches aren't bad. I'm not even going to bother talking about the theme music, because I feel I've beaten that fucking drum to death. I am never going to like it. It is just horrific. It is just like an awful version of the Manic Miner theme on the Spectrum 48K. It's just shocking and shit. However, like, it was...
I'm glad you're not going to talk about it.
No, but the ending of the show, and to end it with Mercedes Mone sort of celebrating with the audience, that's the way you wanted to end it. I just wish they telegraphed it. I wish it did the rating that it kind of deserved to do. For what was, of a 2-hour wrestling show, 75% of it being, at worst, really rock solid. Which, if you consider the shite we have been served up with over the years, particularly from like a WWE, like where the best stuff is 15 fucking minutes, and they put that up on YouTube. Like, you know, here, this is actually like, there's a lot of stuff on here to really enjoy and get your teeth into, and characters to get your teeth into. And I just think they balls that up.
Yeah. But as a positive, like I say, just talking quality of the show, I feel very excited for AEW right now. It's the Ospreay factor, the Elite, who, as Sam had said in the chat before, always been a fan of the Elite, always like the Young Bucks. They're adding it to me, and Mercedes, like you said, starting and punctuating the end of the show again, looking like a gigantic star going off air with those chants going off. It was just perfect, and it felt like a hot product. Toronto's going to feel big next week as well, so they can keep that energy going. I'm excited for it, but obviously we'll talk more the Toronto.